Seth Rogen.
A wildly successful actor, writer, director.
Who starred in the film Superbad, Knocked Up, and The 40-Year-Old Virgin.
This is Seth Rogen.
Seth Rogen has become an iconic figure in Hollywood, with his many films that combined have grossed over $2.8 billion. But how exactly did he get to this stage in his career? Well, let me tell you, it was no easy ride. But Seth had that something about him which, no matter what, his end goal was to write and produce his own movie, which he eventually done, many times, but it was no dumb luck. April 15th, 1982, Vancouver, Canada. Seth was born to parents Mark and Sandy Rogen, and was raised Jewish. And Seth's parents were stress-free as they come.
It's been like incredibly left-wing, especially both my parents.
They weren't obsessed about having millions in the bank. They were a happy married couple who took life day by day. Mark was from Newark, New Jersey, and as Seth described, he was a socialist.
My dad's like a socialist.
And one day moved to Israel, where he would meet a woman called Sandy, and straight away both hit it off, and would find themselves in a relationship, and would make the big jump to move back to Vancouver, where they eventually had Seth. Seth would say that when he was really young, his mother went to school to become a social worker.
My mother went to school to be a social worker when I was very young, and
had done that for a few years, and then after she would work at a department store to work as a cashier.
She was a cashier at a department store.
And his father would work at a vocational college as a known budsman, and expressed his parents weren't bringing in a lot of money. And as he was growing up understanding the value of money, he soon realised that they would just be fine. But also through this, Seth realised a more valuable lesson, that you don't need millions to live a happy life that his mother and father were living. The one thing his parents did love doing were watching movies. They would watch anything they could, and around this time, Seth was roughly 6 or 7 years old. And this is where his early inspiration came from with movies.
When I was probably like 6 or 7 years old is when I started to really want to, the idea of making movies became very fascinating to me.
Every Tuesday as a family, they would go to the cinema in Vancouver, because Tuesday was the cheapest day of the week to watch a film, and they watched whatever was screening that week. And Seth loved it. And this started a new journey for Seth, which would be finding out about writing screenplay.
Running around making movies, I was obsessed with movies, quoting movies, all I want to do is watch movies. I fell in love with movies at a very young age.
This is ultimately when his life changed. Now typically when we go to school, college or university, we are pushed by our parents to give it our 100% and get the best grades possible, as it will aid you to have the best life possible when you leave. But this wasn't Seth's approach, as his academic relationship with school was not as important to Seth as it maybe is for other students. And that's because he realised that the life he was chasing didn't need him to have the best academic accolades. And also he didn't have the pressure from his parents to go down a traditional route, which is to do well in school, get a degree, and get a good job. But the reason why his parents weren't so hard on him was because they noticed the creative spark and addiction he had with movies, and also his progressive passion with writing them. Seth expressed that they were very supportive parents.
I've always worked very hard, and I've always had very supportive parents.
But internally, Seth wasn't a very popular kid, but he also wasn't an introvert. He explained that culturally, he loved school. He loved the aspects of school where you go to parties on a weekend, essentially get up to no good. This part about school Seth loved and had a very positive impact on his childhood. So when he was about 12 years old, he would meet someone that really became his right-hand man.
Fast, yeah, and I was interested in writing and comedy, and
At 12.
yeah, and so was he. He wrote short stories, and when you're 12 and you like writing and you meet another kid who likes writing, it's a very easy connection.
The young man he would meet was called Evan Goldberg, to which Evan was the perfect partner for Seth to be around. He loved movies like Seth, he loved writing movies like Seth, and ultimately his end goal was to write and produce a movie in Hollywood, like Seth. And at this time he expressed how important Evan was to his craft. He said that meeting Evan was the luckiest thing that has ever happened to him.
You know, this kid is a great up-and-comer. I think you're going to enjoy him a lot. Will you please welcome to the stage Mr. Seth Rogen.
Also in the same year, he was introduced to stand-up comedy, which is a very harsh industry if done incorrectly, but expressed that he always loved stand-up and was willing to take the risk many people ponder on. Who often told you that there was more of a strategical reason for his entry into stand-up comedy.
Kind of like a means to an end to me, because again, it's funny because it was weirdly well thought out for being 12 or 13 years old, but I was if I do stand-up comedy, at that time sitcoms were very popular, Seinfeld, things like that, so I was like the most practical path for me to have some sort of success doing this is I'll start start doing stand-up comedy. Maybe I can get an agent, and then maybe I can like get on a sitcom and be like, you know, Ray Romano or Jerry Seinfeld or something like that. And then maybe I can write movies, and that can like turn into a movie career, basically.
It wasn't long before Seth and Evan started working together to turn their ideas into reality. At the age of 13, they started writing the film Superbad. As soon as him turning 16, he would attend the Vancouver Amateur Comedy Contest, and after attending, he would earn a worthy second placement. And within the same year, his first golden opportunity came, and this would be showcased to the world. The show would be called Freaks and Geeks, and it would air from the year 1999 to the year 2000, and he played a character called Ken. And the situation Seth was left in at the time would leave him more responsibility than expected. And that's because when he was offered the role for Freaks and Geeks, he moved out to Los Angeles, but he didn't move alone. His mother and father would also join him in the adventure, as not long before they both lost their jobs. So moving to Los Angeles, which typically is an expensive place to live, Seth not only had himself to pay for, but his parents to cater for. He had a massive weight lifted off his shoulder after having a conversation with his dad.
In a way, it felt like an alleviation of pressure, because after I remember my dad telling me, like, after like 3 months or 6 months of being on Freaks and Geeks, he's like, you've made more money in this time than I've made my entire life put together. So like if anything was like an amazing alleviation of a weight, because there was money all of a sudden. For the first time in our lives, things could be paid for easily.
Freaks and Geeks suddenly became a TV classic. The show gained a lot of fans quite quickly. But never mind the fans they grew, after one season, the show was cancelled due to low ratings. And after the cancellation of Freaks and Geeks, Seth swiftly moved on to the next, which would be another regular TV show called Undeclared, and would again last for a year from the year 2001, ending in 2002. And after this venture, Seth would ultimately not work for a long while, as he couldn't find any work to be a part of. And this is where he would say that Hollywood just isn't fair.
Any given phone call is one that is like making your fucking life, or one that is yet another door slamming in your face that you have to like just suck up and keep moving forward. You know what I mean?
His parents would decide to move back to Canada when he was only 18 years old, and shortly after started to experience financial problems, but it was at his own cost. And there was even a thought of moving back to Canada to live with his parents again, because he might not be able to afford to live out in LA. But around this time is where he would meet his soulmate, to which is his current wife, and at the time was called Lauren Miller. They met at a birthday party at El Cid, which was a Spanish restaurant in Los Angeles, and straight away hit it off and have become each other's companion ever since. Seth found himself getting back into acting. After his hiatus, he would return to a role in a comedy film called The 40-Year-Old Virgin, which would be about a 40-year-old Andy spends his free time playing video games and curating his action figure collection. Despite his age, Andy has never had sex, so his friends push Andy towards losing his virginity. And this film would earn $176 million at box office. The breakthrough from his efforts in his previous film would invite him to be a part of another film alongside acting opposite Katherine Heigl in an unconventional romantic comedy about a one-night stand that leads to an unexpected pregnancy. And this film would be called Knocked Up, which earned $219 million at box office. Then they finally got the interest for someone to take the chance on their film, which was Superbad. And this must have been a moment in awe for both of them, grown up together, both having the same ambitions, and relentlessly perfecting their craft. The film would go ahead and make $169 million worldwide. And then the next film that would be released was Pineapple Express. Pineapple Express would already be in the works years prior, and the film was about a stoner Dale Denton, which was Seth Rogen, who enjoyed a rare strain of marijuana, and was enjoying his time until he drops his roach in a panic of witnessing a murder. Upon learning that the fancy strain can be tracked back to them, Dale and his dealer, who was James Franco, who was a fellow colleague from his Freaks and Geeks show, go on the lam, with a dangerous drug lord and a crooked cop who were hot on their heels. Pineapple Express was loved by the public and would earn $102 million at box office. At this point in Seth's career, he was really making dreams happen, with him trying to get involved in as many projects as he could. With him being involved in Zack and Miri Make a Porno in 2008, Observe and Report in 2009, Take This Waltz in 2011, and would also venture into voice acting, with him doing voiceover work for Dr. Seuss's Horton Hears a Who in 2008, Kung Fu Panda in 2008, and Paul in 2011. But then in 2011, the film that would be most talked about would be Green Hornet, to which had very mixed reviews upon its release. and it was a time where Seth Rogen faced a lot of backlash over one of his films. And this is where Seth really felt the wrath of the harsh reality of the critics.
For Green Hornet, it's fine. Literally, yeah, like the critics were, the reviews were coming out and it was pretty bad and people just kind of like hated it. Like it seemed like a thing people just were taking like joy in disliking a lot. You know what I mean?
But never mind the scrutiny that he was facing. He would say that this film made $35 million on its opening weekend, which was his best opening weekend that he's ever had for any movie.
It opened to like $35 million, which was like, I think at the time, the biggest opening weekend I'd ever been associated with in any capacity. And so it was also like, it did pretty well.
And then him and his writing partner, Evan, would make the jump to make their own company, which they founded, Point Grey Pictures. And then he would top off the year by marrying his current wife, Lauren. Seth would be straight back at work in the next year in 2012 on the film called The Guilt Trip. And this was about an inventor, Andrew Brewster, is about to embark on the road trip of a lifetime. And a quick stop at his mum's house turns into an unexpected cross-country voyage with her along the ride, and the film would make $41 million at box office. Also this same year, Seth and Lauren would make their own charity called Hillitry, which was designed as a resource for millennial generation to learn more about the Alzheimer's disease, as Lauren's mother was sadly a victim to the disease. 2013, a moment that Seth and Evan had been waiting for. Not only did they write this film, but they also directed and produced it. The film that they would release would be called This Is the End. The film ended up earning $20 million on its opening weekend, and then progressed to make $126 million worldwide. Then in 2014 would be, as Seth said, the most successful film he ever made. This film would be the first Bad Neighbors, and he starred with the famous Zac Efron, and Seth played the character Mac Radner. And the film was about Mac and Kelly moving into a quiet neighborhood with a newborn, and suddenly a frat group move next door and party all day and night and cause nothing but mayhem. The family try all they can to get the group to stop, but never do until one night they decide to hang with the young group and realise it's past their time. The film would make $49 million on its opening weekend and progress to make $270 million at worldwide box office. But then his next film, The Interview, got Seth involved in headlines for the wrong reasons, and was under a lot of scrutiny because the film had a plot twist, to which was risky to say the least. A North Korean official warned that there would be retaliation against the United States if the film was released, according to the BBC News. Rogen responded to the incident on Twitter, writing, "People don't usually want to kill me for one of my movies until after they've paid $12 for it." As the interview's December release date neared, a group of hackers called the Guardians of the Peace launched a cyber attack on Sony Pictures Entertainment, the company behind the film. The group was able to obtain tons of company's materials, including the unreleased films and internal emails, and soon made many of these items available to the public. Threats were also made against any movie theatre that agreed to screen the film. The FBI later directly connected the hacking of Sony to the North Korean government. In the wake of these devastating leaks and theatre threats, Sony shelved The Interview. Days later, the company announced the film would be released to a number of indie theatres on Christmas Day. After all the drama that occurred with the film, would end up being released in early 2015, but overall box office numbers would tank way below expectation. Regardless of the threats he was facing, he would still be involving himself in the show business. And in 2015, Seth Rogen played Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak in the biopic Steve Jobs. And after this, he would be starred in a Christmas comedy, The Night Before. And The Night Before would make $52 million, and the Steve Jobs would make $35 million. Seth would also continue his efforts in voiceover work, with him contributing towards the third Kung Fu Panda and Sausage Party. And in 2016, he released a second film to Bad Neighbors called Neighbors 2, and they made $108 million at box office. Going into 2019, not much changed with Seth's schedule. He was constantly working, and so Seth surfaced on the big screen that year in a romantic comedy, Long Shot, which made $53 million at box office, and then that summer, Seth co-starred in the 2019 remake of the animated musical film The Lion King that initially released in 1994. Seth's role would be voiceover in Pumbaa, but it became one of the highest grossing films of all time, with it earning more than $1.6 billion. So this was easily the biggest project that Seth's ever been a part of. 2021 would be more of a personal year for Seth, as he decided he was going to release a book, and the book would be called Yearbook. Since then, Seth has essentially slowed down his works within Hollywood, as he knows he's in a position both mentally and financially to start enjoying his life that he's always dreamed of. He dabbles into the acting world here and there, with him taking part in a film in 2022 called The Fablesman. and this year has been a part of Dumb Money, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and the Super Mario movie. But from a child who was brought up with movies and to then have a constant drive and passion for his end goal to make and produce a movie in Hollywood, should be an inspiration story for anyone that's chasing a dream that they believe is too big. Seth Rogen is an example to take from. His family weren't known, they didn't have money, but they were happy. They raised Seth and he knew what path he wanted to take in life, and since that moment, he's never looked back.